A stranger zipped my wedding dress. And the vampire king whispered, "Your groom's not coming, little wolf." I was 25 years old, standing in front of a mirror in a gown I'd saved 8 months to afford, unaware that everything was about to shatter. In 2 minutes, a stranger would finish zipping my dress and unravel every lie I'd ever believed about myself. In 2 hours, I'd be in the back of a black SUV, watching Atlanta's skyline blur through tears while a creature who shouldn't exist explained why someone wanted me dead. And the question I'd been asking my entire life, who am I, and where did I come from, would finally have an answer. I just wasn't sure I'd survive hearing it. But right now, I was just a bride, standing in the bridal suite of the Atlanta Grand Marquis Hotel, struggling with a zipper that refused to cooperate, dreaming about the man waiting for me downstairs. The man who had promised I would never be alone again. I had spent 25 years searching for belonging. 25 years moving through foster homes and group houses and apartments that never felt like home. 25 years tracing other people's family trees while my own remained a blank page. And now, finally, I was about to have a family of my own. I stared at my reflection. The woman looking back seemed almost like a stranger, soft curls pinned away from my face, makeup hiding the shadows under my eyes from weeks of wedding planning, the vintage lace gown making me look like someone from another era. Someone who had roots. Someone who belonged. If you've ever felt like you were searching for something you couldn't name, if you've ever wondered whether the truth about yourself might be more dangerous than the not knowing, stay. This is that kind of story. Renee? I called toward the bathroom, where my maid of honor had disappeared 10 minutes ago. I need help with a zipper. My arms don't bend that way. No answer. Just the sound of running water. I sighed and reached behind myself again, fingers fumbling uselessly along my spine. In 45 minutes, I would walk down an aisle toward Jake Bourne, the first man who had ever looked at me like I was worth keeping. He had found me in the archives where I worked, researching ancient bloodlines for a client. He had asked questions about my work, then about my life, then about my empty family tree. And when I had admitted that I didn't know where I came from, that I had been found abandoned as an infant with no records, no identification, no trace of origin, he hadn't pitied me. He had looked at me like I was a mystery worth solving. 18 months later, I was wearing white. Renee, seriously, I can't. The words dissolved in my throat. A hand touched the small of my back. Not Renee's familiar fingers. These were large.
Cool.
Moving with a deliberateness that made my skin prickle with warning. The zipper began to slide upward. Slowly. Inch by inch. Each movement accompanied by fingertips that barely grazed my bare skin. Intentional, precise, like whoever stood behind me wanted me to feel every millimeter of contact. Goosebumps erupted across my flesh. Something deep in my chest stirred. Something that felt like recognition. Renee, what are you? My eyes lifted to the mirror. The world stopped. The man behind me stood impossibly still. Tall, over 6 feet, with dark hair swept back from a face that seemed carved from moonlight and shadow. He wore a white jacket over black, the contrast stark against skin so pale it seemed to glow. But it was his eyes that made my blood freeze in my veins. Gold bleeding into crimson. Ancient. Hungry. Watching me like I was something he had been waiting centuries to find. The zipper clicked into place at the nape of my neck. Who? The name I meant to scream died in my throat.
Jake.
I needed Jake. He's not coming, little wolf. The stranger's voice was silk wrapped around a blade, beautiful and devastating in equal measure. His breath ghosted against my ear. I am. My scream never made it past my lips. The bathroom door burst open. Renee stumbled out, her face pale, mascara streaked down her cheeks, and behind her, a massive figure in black gripped her arm like a vice. Gina, run. But I couldn't move. My legs had turned to stone. My heart hammered so hard I could hear it in my ears, a violent drumbeat that seemed to echo off the walls of the bridal suite. The stranger in the mirror hadn't moved. His fingers still rested at the nape of my neck, cool and impossibly steady against my racing pulse. Let her go. His voice carried no urgency, no threat, Just absolute command. She's not part of this. The man holding Renee hesitated, then released her. Renee collapsed against the wall, sobbing. Gina, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. He said he would kill me if I made a sound. Go. The stranger's gold-red gaze never left my reflection. Forget what you saw here. Forget this room. Forget her name. You never knew anyone called Gina Paxson. Renee's sobs cut off. Her face went slack, empty. Without another word, she walked toward the door, opened it, and disappeared into the hallway, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. What did you do to her? My voice cracked. What are you? The stranger's lips curved. Not quite a smile. Something older. Something that knew too much. There isn't time for the full answer. He turned me to face him, gently, impossibly gently, like I was something fragile and ancient. Your groom is coming, and when he arrives, he's going to try to kill you. Jake would never. The door exploded inward. Jake stood in the frame, but he wasn't dressed for a wedding anymore. He wore black tactical gear. In his hand, a knife glinted, curved, strange, etched with symbols that made my vision blur when I tried to focus on them. His handsome face twisted with fury as his eyes locked onto the stranger. Get away from her, Malru. The stranger, Malru, didn't move. You're too late, Hunter. She's under my protection now. She's a bounty. Jake's voice had changed. Colder. Harder. Every trace of the warmth I had loved stripped away like a mask removed. 10 million for her head. You think I spent 18 months playing house for nothing? The words hit me like a physical blow. My knees buckled. 18 months. The late nights, when he'd claimed to be working. The questions about my research into old bloodlines. The way he'd encouraged me to stop searching for my birth parents, to focus on us, on our future. He was never going to marry me. He was waiting to kill me. Jake lunged. Malru moved. I saw nothing but a blur of white, and then Jake was on the ground, the knife skittering across the floor, and Malru stood over him with one pale hand wrapped around his throat. 18 months of hunting, Malru said softly. 18 months of watching you circle her like a vulture waiting for the corpse to stop breathing. And you thought I wouldn't notice? Jake choked out a laugh. The council will send more. You can't protect her forever. I don't need forever. Malrua's grip tightened. I just need long enough for her to understand what she is. Something cracked. Wet. Final. Jake's body went limp. I heard myself screaming, distant, disconnected, like the sound belonged to someone else. My legs gave out. I hit the floor in a pool of white lace, and the tears came without warning, violent and ugly and unstoppable. Not for Jake. I understood that already, somewhere beneath the shock. Not for the man who had planned to murder me. For the girl I had been 30 seconds ago. The bride who thought she was finally going to belong to someone. The fool who believed she had been chosen. Malru crouched before me. His hand touched my chin, cool, steady, tilting my face up until those impossible eyes met mine. You have questions. His voice was almost gentle. About who you are. About why someone wants you dead. About what your blood is worth. I couldn't speak. Could barely breathe. I have answers, little wolf. But we need to leave. Now. Before the council sends someone I can't kill. He rose. Extended his hand. I stared at it. At Jake's body on the floor behind him. At the world shattering around me in pieces I would never be able to reassemble. Who am I? Where did I come from? Why does someone want me dead? I took his hand. His fingers closed around mine, cold, ancient, impossibly strong. Good girl, he murmured. Now run. I woke in a bed that wasn't mine, wearing clothes I didn't remember putting on. For 3 heartbeats, I didn't move. Just stared at the ceiling, high, crown-molded, painted the soft gray of morning fog. Sunlight filtered through gauze curtains, casting patterns across silk sheets that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Then the memories crashed back. Jake's body on the floor. The crack of bone beneath pale fingers. Gold eyes bleeding to crimson in a mirror that reflected a stranger zipping up my wedding dress. Your groom's not coming, little wolf. I sat up too fast.
My head spun.
The room tilted, beautiful, elegant, utterly unfamiliar. Antique furniture. Fresh flowers on a marble-topped dresser. A door that looked solid enough to keep secrets. I tried the handle anyway.
Locked.
Of course. I pressed my forehead against the wood and let myself have 30 seconds. Just 30 seconds to fall apart. To feel the weight of everything I had lost in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Not Jake, not really, because the man I thought I loved had never existed. What I mourned was simpler and more devastating. The hope. The stupid, desperate hope that I had finally found someone who wanted me. 25 years of searching for where I came from. 25 years of empty branches on a family tree that started and ended with my name. And I had been so hungry for belonging that I'd let a hunter walk right into my life, into my bed, into the space where my heart used to be. 30 seconds. Then I wiped my face and started looking for a way out. The window opened onto a second-floor balcony. Below, manicured grounds stretched toward a tree line that seemed impossibly far away. 30 acres, I would learn later, of Georgia red clay and old-growth oaks, surrounding a house that looked like it had survived the Civil War by sheer force of will. A renovated plantation house. The irony wasn't lost on me. Some prisons wear their history in the walls. I made it halfway across the grounds before the young man appeared. He stepped out from behind an azalea bush like he'd been waiting there all along, dark-skinned, early 20s, with a smile that was probably charming under different circumstances. I wouldn't go much further if I were you. I didn't stop walking. Watch me. The wards extend half a mile. He fell into step beside me, hands in his pockets, infuriatingly casual. Trust me, I tried when I first got here. You'll hit a wall of pain at the tree line, and then you'll wake up back in your room with the worst headache of your life. I stopped. Turned. Who are you? Micah. That easy smile again. Groundskeeper. Occasional errand boy. Fellow captive, if we're being technical about it. He shrugged. The boss collects strays. You get used to it. I'm not a stray.
No.
His eyes, warm brown, almost human, flickered with something that might have been recognition. You're something else entirely. That's why he's been looking for you for so long. Before I could ask what that meant, a woman's voice cut across the lawn. Micah. Enough. She stood on the back porch like she'd grown there, tall, severe, her dark hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her pale features into something carved from marble. Everything about her radiated cold disapproval. Miss Paxson. She didn't offer her hand. I am Theodora. I manage this household. Dinner is at 7. You will be expected. Not invited. Expected. And if I refuse? Her smile was thinner than a knife's edge. Then you will be hungry. She turned and disappeared into the house. Micah gave me an apologetic look. She's not so bad once you get past the first century, or 2. Century? 200 years of service. He was already walking away, back toward whatever tasks occupied a groundskeeper on a vampire's estate. She takes loyalty seriously. Don't worry, you'll figure out who's who soon enough. Dinner was a test I hadn't studied for. The dining room could have seated 20, but only 4 places were set. Anthony at the head of the table, Theodora to his right, a massive man with calculating eyes to his left, and me at the far end. The distance felt deliberate. A reminder of where I stood in whatever hierarchy governed this house. The man, Bram, I would learn, watched me like I was a math problem he couldn't quite solve. Every time I moved, his attention tracked me, measuring, assessing, finding me wanting. Anthony, by contrast, barely looked at me at all. He ate with the precise economy of someone who had stopped needing food centuries ago, but remembered the motions. Spoke quietly to Theodora about matters I couldn't follow. Ignored me so completely that my presence seemed like an afterthought. It made me furious. And beneath the fury, something worse. It made me want him to notice. I set down my fork. $10 million. The table went silent. Anthony's eyes finally lifted to mine.
Gold, in this light.
The crimson banked, but not gone. Excuse me? That's what Jake said. The bounty on my head. 10 million for proof of my death. I held his gaze. That's a lot of money. Someone must really want me gone. Yes. For 25 years. Since I was a baby. Yes.
Why? He set down his napkin.
Theodora and Bram exchanged glances, but said nothing. Because of what you are, Gina Paxson. Because of what your blood represents. And what is that? The end of a war that's been raging for 1,000 years. He rose from his chair, and the room seemed to shrink around him, this ancient creature in his beautiful prison, watching me like I was the answer to a question he'd been asking for centuries. Or the beginning of something far worse. The council hasn't decided which yet. I stood too. Refused to let him tower over me. That doesn't answer why you care. You killed Jake. You brought me here. You're protecting me from a bounty you could claim yourself. My voice cracked, but I didn't look away. What's in it for you? Anthony crossed the room. Slowly. Deliberately. Until he stood close enough that I could see the pulse of something ancient beneath his skin, could feel the cold radiating from him like winter given form. I've been looking for you for a very long time, Gina. His voice dropped to something private. Something that felt like a secret being pressed into my hands. Long before there was a bounty. Long before you were born.
Why? He didn't answer.
Just reached up, slowly, giving me time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers barely grazed my skin, but the touch burned like a brand. Get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow, I'll show you who you really are. He left me standing in that empty dining room, surrounded by centuries of secrets, wearing a dead man's ring on my finger and the ashes of my old life in my chest.
I didn't sleep that night.
I don't think I was meant to. The next morning, Anthony took me to a room I hadn't known existed. It was hidden behind a panel in the library, a door that looked like a bookshelf until he pressed something I couldn't see, and the whole thing swung inward. Beyond it, a narrow staircase descended into the earth, into air that smelled like dust and centuries and secrets kept so long they'd forgotten how to be spoken. This is where I keep the things that matter, he said. The things too dangerous to destroy and too painful to look at every day. The archives stretched farther than the house above it. Stone walls lined with shelves. Glass cases holding artifacts that made my eyes ache when I tried to focus on them. And maps, dozens of them, some so old the paper had turned to something closer to fabric, marked with territories and boundaries that didn't match any geography I recognized. The world used to be different, Anthony said, watching me take it in. Before humans claimed it, before cities covered the places where our kind once walked freely. There were pacts, territories, wars that lasted centuries and truces that lasted longer. He moved to a table in the center of the room, where a leather-bound folder waited like it had been placed there just for this moment. The Paxson pack was one of the oldest. Their bloodline traced back to the original wolves, the first of our kind, before the bloodlines splintered and weakened. Our kind. The words felt foreign in my mouth. You keep saying that. Like I'm supposed to know what it means. You are a wolf, Gina. He said it simply, without drama. Like stating the color of the sky. The last of the Paxson wolves. The only survivor of a massacre that was supposed to end your bloodline forever. I wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him he was insane. That I was just a girl from Atlanta who worked in an archives office and had never howled at the moon or grown fur or any of the things wolves were supposed to do in the stories. But something in my chest stirred at his words. Something that had been sleeping for 25 years, waiting for permission to wake up. Show me. Anthony opened the folder. Photographs. Dozens of them, faded with age, but still clear enough to see faces, bodies, lives captured in moments that no longer existed. Men and women and children, gathered in groups that looked like family portraits, except the settings were wrong. Forest clearings. Places that felt wild in ways that made my skin prickle. The Paxson pack, Anthony said. Taken over the course of 3 decades before the massacre. I flipped through them with trembling fingers. Looking for something. I didn't know what until I found it. A woman. She stood at the edge of a group photograph, slightly apart from the others, her face turned toward the camera like she'd been caught mid-thought. Her hair was dark, her posture straight, her expression holding something that looked like hope fighting against caution. But it was her eyes that stopped my heart. I knew those eyes. I had seen them every day of my life, every time I looked in a mirror. "That's her," I whispered. "My mother." Anthony didn't answer. He didn't need to. I traced her face with my fingertip, barely touching the photograph, afraid that too much pressure would make her disappear. 25 years I had searched for this. 25 years of empty records and dead ends and social workers who told me some questions didn't have answers. And here she was, young, alive, looking at a camera like she had all the time in the world. She hadn't known she was going to die. She hadn't known her daughter would spend a lifetime searching for her face. What was her name? My voice cracked. Miriam. Anthony's voice was gentle. Miriam Paxson.
Daughter of the Alpha.
She was supposed to lead the pack one day. What happened? She fell in love. The way he said it, like love was a tragedy, like falling was always followed by breaking, made my chest ache. The massacre happened in a single night, he continued. 47 wolves. The entire Paxson bloodline, wiped out between dusk and dawn. The official record says it was a vampire clan, a territorial dispute that escalated beyond reason. I looked up at him. At this creature who had told me he was half vampire, who had killed Jake without hesitation, who had brought me to this place and shown me the face of my dead mother. "But you're a vampire." The words came out harder than I intended. "You're standing here protecting me from vampires. Why would your kind slaughter wolves, and why would you care if one survived?" Something shifted in his expression. The openness I had glimpsed, the almost gentleness with which he had handed me my mother's photograph, shuttered closed like a door slamming. "Some questions have answers you're not ready for. That's not good enough." I was shaking now, with anger or grief or something too big to name. "You brought me here. You showed me her face. You don't get to stop now. I don't get to do anything." His voice was quiet. Final. "I am protecting you, Gina Paxson. But protection has limits. And truth." He looked at me with those ancient eyes, gold bleeding to crimson at the edges. "Truth can destroy as easily as it can save. I won't give you more than you can carry." He left me there, alone with the photographs, alone with my mother's face looking up at me like a ghost who had finally found her way home. That night I dreamed of running. Not running away. Running towards something, through trees I had never seen, over earth that felt familiar beneath feet that weren't quite my own. My lungs burned with exertion and something else, something that felt like joy. Pure, wild, uncomplicated joy. There were others around me. I couldn't see them, but I could feel them. Warmth at my sides, breath matching mine, hearts beating in a rhythm that said pack, family, home. And then the howl. It tore through the night, long and mournful and achingly beautiful. I threw back my head to answer it, and the sound that came from my throat was nothing human. It was ancient, primal. It was the sound of something that had been caged for 25 years finally finding its voice. I woke with a gasp. The room was dark. Moonlight streamed through the curtains, painting everything silver. My heart pounded in a rhythm that felt wrong. Too fast, too deep, like something inside me was trying to match a frequency I had never heard before. I looked down at my hands, and I stopped breathing. My fingernails had lengthened,
Curved.
sharpened to points that caught the light like small, deadly crescents.
Claws.
I had claws. I pressed them against my chest, feeling the strange, new hardness of them, the way they seemed to pulse with something alive. My wolf was waking up, and she remembered things I had spent a lifetime forgetting. I found Anthony in the garden at dawn, standing motionless among the roses like a statue that had forgotten it was supposed to be stone. The sun was barely a suggestion on the horizon, painting everything in shades of gray and gold, and he stood with his face tilted toward it like a man who remembered what warmth felt like but could no longer feel it himself. I held up my hands. The claws had retracted some time before morning, but I could still feel them beneath the surface, a pressure under my fingernails, a wrongness that wouldn't fade. What's happening to me? He didn't turn, didn't startle, like he had known I was coming before I knew it myself. You're waking up, he said. The part of you that was buried when you were an infant. The part your mother tried to hide when she sent you away. I grew claws, Anthony. My voice cracked on his name. In my sleep. I grew claws. That's not waking up. I didn't have a word for it. Didn't have a framework for any of this. I need answers. Real ones. Not riddles.
He finally looked at me.
Those gold crimson eyes held something I hadn't seen before. Not pity, not calculation, but something softer. Something that looked almost like recognition. Come with me. He led me through the house to a room I hadn't discovered in my explorations, a study hidden behind a door that looked like part of the wall. Inside, the air was thick with age. Weapons hung on the walls, blades etched with symbols that made my vision blur. Books lined the shelves, their spines cracked and faded, written in languages that had died before English was born. But what drew my attention was the wall of photographs. Dozens of them, spanning what looked like centuries. The same face appeared in almost all of them. Anthony, unchanging, standing beside people who aged and disappeared while he remained frozen in time. 300 years ago, he said, I was made into a vampire against my will. I turned to face him. He stood by the window, his back to me, his shoulders carrying a weight I was only beginning to understand. I was born in what is now Louisiana. My pack, the Malru, had lived in those swamps for generations.
We kept to ourselves.
Avoided the wars that tore other packs apart. Survived by being invisible. His voice was flat, reciting facts like they belonged to someone else. I was 19 when they came. Vampires, looking for sport. They killed my family, my packmates, everyone I had ever loved. My chest tightened. I knew that kind of loss, not the violence of it, but the emptiness afterward. The way the world keeps spinning like nothing happened while you stand still, wondering how everyone else can breathe when the air has turned to ash. I should have died with them. He turned to face me, and the light caught the angles of his face, the ageless beauty that suddenly looked more like a curse than a gift. But the vampire who found me, he didn't want to kill me.
He wanted to turn me.
He thought it would be amusing, making a wolf into the thing he hated most. He didn't know what you were.
No.
And when the turn was complete, when vampire blood mixed with wolf blood in my veins, he paused. Something flickered behind his eyes. It created something that had never existed before. A hybrid. Both and neither. 2 vampire for the wolves. 2 wolf for the vampires. He crossed to the wall of photographs, touching the oldest one. A daguerreotype of a young man who looked almost human, standing stiffly beside a woman in Victorian dress. I've spent 3 centuries alone, Gina. Watching both sides destroy each other. Watching them hunt anything that doesn't fit their categories. I've been called abomination, aberration, monster. I've been hunted by my own kind and rejected by those who made me what I am. The grief in his voice was ancient. Layer upon layer of it, accumulated over lifetimes. I understood suddenly why he had brought me here. Why he had saved me from Jake. Why he had looked at me in that mirror like I was something precious. He saw himself in me. And then, he continued, 25 years ago, I heard rumors. A child had survived the Paxton massacre. A child who had been hidden before the slaughter, spirited away to the human world where no one would think to look for her. A child who might be, he stopped. Like you. I finished for him. Yes. I shook my head. I'm not like you. I'm just a wolf. My mother was a wolf, and I. Are you certain? The question hung between us. I wanted to say yes. Wanted to hold on to the simple explanation, the clean lineage, the story that made sense. But my claws had grown in my sleep. My blood had screamed when Anthony touched my zipper. Something inside me had recognized him before I knew his name. Anthony moved to a desk in the corner and opened a drawer. When he turned back, he held a photograph I hadn't seen before. My mother, Miriam, younger than in the other pictures, her face soft with something that looked like love. She was standing in a garden. This garden, I realized, the same roses visible behind her, and beside her stood a man.
Pale skin.
Dark hair swept back from features that seemed carved from marble.
And eyes.
Eyes the color of old gold, bleeding to crimson at the edges. My breath stopped. His name was Leonid, Anthony said quietly. He was one of the original bloodline. A vampire. And he fell in love with your mother in the spring of 1998.
No.
The word came out strangled. That's not. Wolves and vampires don't. They don't. Anthony's voice was gentle. It was forbidden. Impossible, according to everything both sides believed. And yet. He pressed the photograph into my hands. There you are. The child of a wolf and a vampire. Born, not made. Something that has never existed in 1,000 years of war. I stared at my father's face, at the eyes that were echoed in Anthony's, at the love written across my mother's features, a love so fierce it had defied everything her world told her was possible. The massacre, I whispered. It wasn't about territory.
No.
It was about me. The Vampire Council discovered what your parents had done, what you were. Anthony's voice hardened. They couldn't allow proof that their precious bloodlines could mix with wolves, that we could create something new. So they ordered the Paxton Pact destroyed, and they've been hunting you ever since. The photograph blurred. Tears I hadn't felt coming spilled down my cheeks, and I let them fall. Let myself grieve for parents I had never known, for a life that had been stolen before I could remember it, for a father who had looked at my mother like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. They had loved each other. They had loved me, and they had died for it. Your father, Anthony said softly, was my friend. One of the only friends I've had in 3 centuries. When he fell in love with Miriam, I warned him, told him it was too dangerous, that the council would never allow it. He knelt before me, bringing his eyes level with mine. He looked at me and said, "Some things are worth dying for." And he was right. His hand reached up, brushing a tear from my cheek with impossible gentleness. You, Gina Paxson, you are worth dying for. You're not just the last of your mother's bloodline. You're the proof that everything they believe is a lie. I looked at the photograph in my hands, at my parents, frozen in a moment of impossible love. And I understood, finally, why Anthony had been searching for me. Not just because I might be like him, but because I was the daughter of his friend. The legacy of a love that had cost everything. What am I supposed to do? I asked. Anthony stood. The sadness in his eyes was older than I could comprehend. That, he said, is the one thing I can't tell you. Some choices have to be made alone. I spent 3 days in that study. Not because Anthony kept me there. Because I couldn't leave. Because the photograph of my parents had cracked something open inside me, and I needed to understand everything that had spilled out. Anthony brought me food I didn't eat, water I forgot to drink. He sat with me sometimes, answering questions I hadn't known I'd been carrying my entire life. Other times he left me alone with the archives, the records, the fragments of a history I should have inherited but had been stolen instead. I learned my mother's favorite flower was jasmine, that she used to sing when she thought no one was listening, that she had fought her father, the Alpha, for months before he accepted her love for a vampire. That in the end, he had given his blessing not because he approved, but because he had looked into his daughter's eyes and seen something he couldn't argue with. I learned my father had lived for over 400 years before he met her, that he had been cold and distant, a creature of politics and calculation who had survived by feeling nothing, until a wolf with fierce eyes and a fiercer heart had walked into a neutral ground gathering and looked at him like she could see past the centuries of armor he'd built around himself. I learned they had 3 months together. 3 months of stolen meetings and whispered promises, and a love so consuming it had burned through every law their worlds had built to keep them apart. And then my mother had discovered she was pregnant. With me. The council found out, Anthony said on the 3rd night. He sat across from me in the dim light of the study, his face half-shadowed. One of your father's trusted advisors. Leonid had confided in him, hoping for support. Instead, The advisor went straight to the elders. They ordered the massacre. Within a week, they couldn't risk you being born, couldn't risk proof that their bloodlines weren't as pure, as separate, as supreme as they claimed. His voice was bitter. 1,000 years of war, Gina. 1,000 years of teaching both sides that we are fundamentally different, that wolves are beneath vampires, that mixing blood is abomination. Your existence proves all of it was a lie. I looked down at the photograph in my hands. My parents, young and impossibly in love, standing in the garden where I now walked as a prisoner. They had no idea, in that frozen moment, that their love was a death sentence, that the child growing inside my mother would cost them everything. They died getting me out, I said. It wasn't a question. Your mother went into labor 3 weeks early. The attack came that same night, the council's forces, overwhelming the Paxson compound before anyone could mount a defense. Leonid fought his way to her, helped deliver you in the middle of a massacre. Anthony's voice dropped. They had minutes, maybe less. Your mother gave you to a packmate, a woman named Tessa, who had stayed hidden during the attack. Tessa ran with you into the woods while your parents stayed behind to buy her time. I closed my eyes, saw it like a memory that wasn't mine. My mother, bleeding and exhausted, pressing me into a stranger's arms. My father, fangs bared, standing between his family and the army that had come to erase us. They died together, Anthony finished, holding the line, so you could live. Something cracked in my chest. I had spent 25 years believing I was abandoned. 25 years thinking my parents had given me away because they didn't want me, that whatever had severed me from my origins had marked me as unlovable, as disposable, as not worth keeping. And the truth was the opposite. The truth was they had died for me. They killed my entire family. My voice didn't sound like mine. It was raw, serrated, the voice of something wounded and waking. 47 wolves. My mother, my father, everyone who ever loved me or could have loved me. I looked at Anthony through a blur of tears I didn't bother to hide. Because my parents loved each other? Because your existence proves their ideology is a lie. His eyes held mine, gold burning against the darkness. The council needs the war, needs wolves and vampires to hate each other. As long as both sides believe we are fundamentally incompatible, they maintain control. But you, he leaned forward. You are living proof that we can create something together. Something new. Something that doesn't fit their categories. So, they want me dead. They want you erased. Like you never existed. Like the love that created you was impossible. The grief that had been building in my chest transmuted, shifted, became something hotter, sharper, something with teeth.
Rage.
I stood so fast the chair scraped against the floor. My hands were shaking, and I could feel my claws pressing against the underside of my fingernails, desperate to emerge. They murdered everyone I came from. The words burned in my throat. They've been hunting me for 25 years. They sent Jake too. I couldn't finish. Couldn't say the word marry when what I meant was slaughter. And you've known. This whole time, you've known what I am. Yes. You've been protecting me. Yes. Why? I was crying now, tears hot and angry on my cheeks. What do you owe my father? What do you owe a dead man and his dead wife and the ghost of a family that doesn't exist anymore? Anthony stood, slowly, like he was approaching something wild and wounded. Something that might bolt if he moved too fast. I told you, he said quietly. I've spent 300 years alone, hated by both sides, belonging nowhere. I watched the only friend I ever had fall in love and die for it. I buried what was left of him with my own hands. His voice cracked, the first time I had heard it break. And I swore I would find his daughter. That I would protect what he died for, even if it took me centuries. He stopped an arm's length away. Close enough that I could feel the cold radiating from his skin. Close enough to see the ache behind his eyes. You're not a debt, Gina. You're not an obligation. You're the only proof that Leonid's love meant something. That his life meant something. That 300 years of loneliness might have had a purpose. I looked at him, really looked, maybe for the first time, not as a captor or a predator or a stranger who had shattered my wedding day, as someone who understood in his bones what it meant to be hated for what you are,
To be hunted for existing.
to carry a loneliness so profound it had become the architecture of your soul. Before I could stop myself, I reached up and touched his face. He went completely still, like I had pressed a blade to his throat instead of fingertips to his cheek. Like the touch of another person was something he had forgotten how to survive. 300 years, I whispered. You've been alone for 300 years. Yes. The word was barely audible. And you've been looking for someone like you. Yes. I traced the line of his jaw, felt him tremble beneath my touch. This ancient creature, this hybrid who had survived centuries of war and hatred, shaking because a woman was touching his face. Did you find her? His hand came up to cover mine. His fingers were cold, but the grip was gentle, desperate, like he was holding onto something he'd been searching for his whole eternal life. I don't know yet. His voice was rough. Did I? I didn't answer with words. I leaned up on my toes and pressed my lips to his.
Soft.
Tentative. A question more than an answer. He responded like a man drowning. His arms wrapped around me, pulling me against him, and I felt the cold of his skin seep through my clothes even as heat bloomed in my chest. The kiss deepened, 300 years of loneliness pouring into the space between us, meeting 25 years of mine. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. His forehead rested against mine, his eyes closed, his hands still gripping me like I might disappear. This is dangerous, he whispered. I know. The council will come for you. For us. I know. I can't promise to protect you forever. I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Those ancient, wounded, beautiful eyes that had watched the world destroy everyone he loved. Then don't promise forever, I said. Promise now. His smile was small and sad and more genuine than anything I'd seen on his face before. Now, he agreed. I can promise now. It was enough. For that moment, it was enough. The envoy arrived 3 days after our first kiss. I heard them before I saw them. Voices drifting up from the foyer, sharp and formal in ways that made my skin prickle with warning. I crept to the top of the staircase, pressing myself against the wall where shadows would hide me, and watched. 3 figures stood in the entrance hall. 2 were guards, massive, silent, radiating the kind of cold that told me they were vampires before I even saw their faces. The 3rd was a woman, elegant in the way of things that have never had to struggle, her silver hair swept back from features that looked carved from ice. Anthony stood before them. His posture was relaxed, but I had learned to read the tension beneath his stillness. The way his shoulders drew back, the way his fingers curled slightly at his sides. The council's patience is not infinite, the woman said. Her voice was cultured, precise, dripping with centuries of aristocratic disdain. You have harbored the Paxson aberration for nearly 2 weeks. This is a violation of the Accords. The Accords protect all supernatural beings from unlawful execution. Anthony's voice was calm.
Too calm.
Last I checked, existing isn't a crime. Her existence is the crime. The woman's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. You know this. You've known it since you pulled her from that hotel. The council is offering you a choice, Anthony. Surrender the hybrid, and your household will be spared. Continue this foolish protection, and you will share her fate. My stomach dropped. His household. Theodora. Micah.
Bram.
Everyone who had served him, lived with him, built something resembling a life within these walls. They would all die because of me. The council can take their offer, Anthony said quietly, and choke on it. The woman's expression flickered. Just for a moment, surprise cracking through the ice. Then it smoothed over, replaced by something colder. Something final. You have 72 hours. After that, we will come in force. And we will not be offering terms. She turned and walked out, her guards falling into step behind her. The door closed with a sound like a coffin lid settling. I didn't realize I was shaking until I tried to move. 72 hours. 3 days. And then an army would descend on this house, and everyone in it would die, because Anthony had refused to hand me over. Because of me. I waited until the house fell silent. Until Anthony retreated to his study and Theodora disappeared into whatever shadows she occupied when she wasn't glaring at me. Until the moon rose high and full, casting silver light through my bedroom window. Then I ran. I made it past the gardens, past the tree line, into woods I had never explored. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. The wards Micah had warned me about pressed against my skull like a vice, sending spikes of pain through my temples with every step. But I kept running. If I could get far enough, if I could draw their attention away from the compound, maybe the council would follow me instead. Maybe Anthony's household would be spared. Maybe. I slammed into something solid.
Not something. Someone.
Anthony stood in the darkness, like he had grown from it, his pale face illuminated by moonlight, his gold-crimson eyes burning with something I couldn't name. He had moved faster than I could track, intercepting me without a sound. Don't. His voice cracked on the word. Just that one syllable, and I heard 300 years of loss beneath it. Don't make me lose you too. I was crying. I hadn't realized until I felt the tears cooling on my cheeks, mixing with the sweat of my desperate flight. I'm not yours to lose. Then become mine. He stepped closer. His hand reached for my face, but stopped just short of touching, trembling in the space between us. Choose to stay. Not because you're trapped. Not because you have nowhere else to go. But because this is where you want to be. I looked at him. This ancient creature who had spent centuries alone. Who had watched everyone he loved die while he remained, frozen in time, carrying grief that would crush a normal person. Who had saved me from a wedding that would have been a murder and shown me truth after painful truth because he believed I was strong enough to bear it. He had never lied to me, even when the truth was devastating, even when it would have been easier to keep me ignorant. I don't trust you, I said. I know. I don't know what I'm becoming. Neither do I. The council will come. They'll burn this place to the ground. Yes. And you'll fight them anyway. For me. His hand finally touched my face, cold fingers tracing the path of my tears with unbearable gentleness. I would burn the world for you, little wolf. Don't you understand that by now? I closed my eyes, let myself feel the weight of his touch. The impossibility of this moment, a woman who had spent her whole life searching for belonging, standing in the dark with a creature who had spent centuries searching for the same thing. I'm not running anymore. The words came out quiet.
Certain.
Not a surrender, but a decision. I turned and walked back toward the compound. He fell into step beside me, close enough that our shoulders nearly touched, silent in a way that felt less like emptiness and more like understanding. When we reached the door, I paused.
Turned to look at him.
The expression on his face stopped my breath. Hope. Small and fragile and barely visible, like a flame cupped against the wind. But there, unmistakable, in the eyes of a man who had stopped believing in hope centuries ago. I didn't say anything. Neither did he. But something had shifted between us. Something that couldn't be unshifted. I walked through the house in silence, my feet carrying me to the study, without conscious thought. The photograph waited on the desk where I had left it, my parents, young and alive, frozen in a moment of impossible love. I picked it up with hands that no longer trembled. For 25 years, I had been searching, moving through foster homes and group houses and relationships that never quite fit, always looking for something I couldn't name. I had thought I was searching for where I came from, for my history, for answers to questions that had haunted me since I was old enough to understand that other children had parents and I had only absence. But looking at their faces now, my mother's fierce eyes, my father's ancient gaze softened by a love that had defied everything his world told him was possible, I finally understood. I wasn't looking for where I came from. I was looking for proof that I was wanted. And here it was. Not in DNA tests or genealogy records, or the kind of documentation I had spent years hoping to find. Here it was in a photograph of two people who had loved each other so much they had died for it, who had loved me so much they had given everything to ensure I survived. I had been wanted. I had been worth dying for. The tears came again, but this time they didn't feel like grief. They felt like something releasing, like a wound finally beginning to heal. Behind me, I heard Anthony's footsteps, felt him stop in the doorway, watching me the way he always watched me, like I was something precious, something rare, something he had been waiting 300 years to find. "The council is coming," I said without turning around. "Yes." "In 72 hours." "Yes." I set the photograph down, straightened my spine, felt something settle into place inside me. Not peace, exactly, but purpose. The kind of certainty that comes from finally knowing who you are. "Then we have 72 hours to prepare." I turned to face him, and for the first time since that stranger had zipped up my wedding dress, I smiled. I'm not the woman who stood in that bridal suite. I'm not the orphan who spent her whole life searching for a family. I held his gaze, gold meeting gold, hybrid meeting hybrid, two impossible creatures standing on the edge of a war that had been raging for 1,000 years. I am the daughter of Miriam Paxson and Leonid of the original bloodline. I am the proof that everything they believe is a lie. And I am done hiding. Anthony's smile matched mine.
Fierce.
Dangerous. Full of something that looked like pride. "Then let them come," he said. "Let them see what they created when they tried to destroy us." I am not the woman who stood in that bridal suite. I am something new. And I am just getting started. There are others like me. I know that now. Women who stood at the edge of everything they thought they knew and chose to step forward anyway. Women who learned that the most dangerous thing isn't the monster in front of you, it's the truth you've been hiding from yourself. If this story found something in you, if you felt it in your chest, in your blood, in the quiet place where you keep the questions you've never been brave enough to ask, there's more. Not just of this story, of this world, of these women.
Subscribe.
Not because I'm asking, because you know you don't want to lose this.